A legend over 100 years old. A red-eyed monster said to be unkillable. Does this demon still lurk amid the swamps of Florida and Alabama? What do we really know about the legend of Two-Toed Tom? For about 100 years there have been stories of a monster lurking in the swamps along the Alabama-Florida border. An enormous alligator said to be unkillable. Folk call this monster Two-Toed Tom, but many believe that this is no mere alligator. Indeed, if the stories are true, he's unlike any creature to ever crawl out of the deep. So who, or what, is Two-Toed Tom? Is he really unkillable? And could he still be lurking in the swamps of Florida and Alabama, even today? Two-Toed Tom is said to be a 14-foot-long, unkillable alligator with burning red eyes and a body built like a living nightmare. He's said to have eaten full-grown deer, cattle, and, yes, even people. His most distinctive feature, the one that gave him his name, is the twisted, mangled track he leaves behind, a single forefoot bearing just 2 toes, the rest of which were torn off long ago by a steel trap. A cruel injury that should have killed him, but it didn't. Just made him angrier. According to the earliest accounts, Two-Toed Tom first rose to infamy in the 1920s around the town of Florala, Alabama. Farmers began finding their livestock mutilated. Cows, pigs, goats, and even dogs were routinely snatched in the dead of night. At first, they thought it was just another hungry gator, but then they saw the 2-toed prints, sometimes found far from the waterline, even beside cow pens and porches. That's when they knew Old Red Eyes had come calling. The legend doesn't stop there, and soon things became far darker. In Carl Karma's 1934 book, Stars Fell on Alabama, he recounts tales of men and women disappearing, and far worse. Indeed, in the most horrific versions of the tale, Two-Toed Tom's appetites and actions are said to be so evil that I would be demonetized just for talking about it. So I'll leave that to you to research yourselves if you want, but you've been warned. As these stories spread, people began to believe that Old Red Eyes wasn't just a particularly large and aggressive alligator, but something demonic, a red-eyed hell demon that fed not just on flesh, but on fear. And try as they might, no one could kill him. One of the most infamous stories of Two-Toed Tom comes from Stars Fell on Alabama and relays the story of a desperate farmer named Pap Haynes who had lost livestock multiple times and eventually would lose something far worse. Indeed, this story became the moment that Two-Toed Tom was immortalised into folklore. Unkillable, unstoppable, and unforgettable. Over the years, hunters came and went. Bullets, traps, poisons, none of it worked. Even in the 1970s, new reports emerged of two-toed tracks found deep in the Florida wilds. And always the same story. Dead animals, vanishing people, and burning red eyes watching from the reeds. No one ever caught him. No one ever proved he wasn't real. Even today, some folks say that he's out there still, watching and waiting for the next person foolish enough to stray too close to the water.
They say he was born in some blackwater swamp that nobody dared name. Mean as sin and twice as hungry. 14 feet of hard scale and muscle, red eyes that glowed like devil's coals, and one mangled front foot, just 2 toes on the left, the rest taken clean off by a steel trap long ago. And ever since, he's hated men and man-made things. Hated them enough to come after not just your livestock, but you, if you stray too close to the waterline. Pap Haynes knew this. He bought a patch of land from the lumber company, some clutch of years back. Folks out there warned him though, told him not to run cows, not to let his pigs roam, not to water his mules at the ponds. Said old Two Toes could take down a mule with just one flip of his massive tail. Keep to the wells, they said, and keep a pine knot handy, 'cause bullets, plenty of folks had done tried that. They bounced right off that old gator's back. But a pine knot, swung hard enough at the base of the skull, well, that might give you half a chance. But still, Pap took the land. Took the risk. First, he lost a cow, then her calf 2 nights later. The track said that old Tom had come right up to the pen and dragged the poor thing out into the dark. One day, Pap was out in Andalusia and saw that there was a $100 reward for old Red Eyes that had gone unclaimed for over 10 years. He set out with an old sharpshooter who said that all he needed to catch old Two Toes was a clear shot and a whole lot of patience. That man waited in a tree hide for a full week. He had the patience, but he never got the shot. And then, for a spell, it seemed that old Two-Toed Tom had disappeared. Perhaps he died. No one could really say. 10 long years passed. Pap's wife died. His son married, and grandkids came. Life went on. And folks began to forget about old Red Eyes. Until the mule vanished. Pap and the family had gone to bring lunch to some road workers one day, and when they got back, all they found was half a mule by the pond, chewed to the bone, and right there in the mud, as clear as a curse, that two-toed track. Tom was back. They tried it all, Pap and his son. Steel traps wouldn't work. Old Tom remembered them all too well. Poison neither. So it was that one day they tracked him, followed those two-toed prints to one pond, and then another. And then, with no more tracks leading out, they knew they had him cornered. Old Red Eyes was lurking somewhere in this pond, all right. Leaving his son there to keep watch, Pap rode hard into town and came back with 15 syrup buckets full of dynamite. They packed them full of cottonseed and dirt, lit 3 at a time, and hurled them in. Boom! The earth shook, trees came up by their roots, and the pond heaved like a dying beast. Nothing could live through that. Not even old Red Eyes, they thought. But they were wrong. They spied then a new set of tracks coming up from a nearby pond in a clump of water oaks and crabgrass, and trailing down a shallow branch and down into the hollow. Still, they couldn't find him. They were headed home when they heard the screams, coming from the first pond to which they tracked old Two Toes. Everybody ran, and yet Pap, 60 years if he was a day, got there before anyone else. But still, he was too late. He got there only just in time to see two red eyes sinking beneath the water. And he didn't notice her at first. You see, with all of the commotion with the dynamite, Pap's granddaughter, only 12 years old, had come out to see what all the fuss and noise was about. And so, at the edge of the water, she met old Two-Toed Tom. And well, that was that. After that, some said Two-Toed Tom had gone south, made his way into Florida. Folks down in Stedman, 10 miles down, lost a few shoats not long after that. There was red eye sightings, two-toed prints, bellowing in the night that made the dogs howl and the horses go mad. Same old stories. But still, nobody could catch him. Some started to say he was digging tunnels, secret paths from pond to pond, from swamp to swamp. He was not just an ordinary gator. No. Old Tom, he was a demon. Folks now say he can't be killed. They say he's got the devil's patience. He'll wait days, weeks, hell, sometimes years, then rise again, red eyes gleaming, to claim what's his. And Pap, well, he lives alone now. His family all moved away. They begged him to come with them, but the old man refused. And now, he just sits there, still clutching his old pine knot. Says he's waiting. Waiting for the day Two-Toed Tom comes home. Most folks just shake their head and say, poor old Pap. They say they don't believe anymore. But if the frogs go quiet, and the birds stop singing, if they hear a splash by the pond, or see a muddy trail with just two toes in the print, they don't go near the water.
If Two-Toed Tom was just an unusually large alligator, then by any natural measure, he should be long dead. But that's the thing about legends. They tend not to die. Though Tom's reign of terror began in the 1920s, reports of his two-toed tracks didn't stop there. In fact, they intensified. By the 1970s, newspapers like the Pensacola News Journal were still publishing sightings. Locals claim to have found his distinctive two-toed footprints on Boynton Island near Redhead, Florida. That's nearly 50 years after his first rampage, when he was already said to be incredibly large. How could one alligator survive so long? It's a little-known fact, but alligators don't technically die of old age. As long as their environment supports them, they just keep growing. Slowly, relentlessly. Some researchers call it negligible senescence, which is a fancy way of saying gators might not age the way we think. Now, big disclaimer here, that's not to say that they're immortal, because they do not have a reset button for their lifespan. The only known species considered biologically immortal is the immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii, which can revert back to a polyp when faced with stress, effectively resetting its life cycle and giving it the potential, outside of predation, to live indefinitely. While it's difficult to determine the exact maximum lifespan of alligators in the wild, LouisianaAlligators.com reports that alligators
average 70 years, but can be 100 years old if they can survive a difficult life, which starts with biting and fighting that never ends.
Could Tom, wounded but cunning, have disappeared into Florida and Alabama's tangled waterways, growing ever larger, more elusive, and more dangerous? It's hard to say. And then there's the strange behaviour. Decades after the first attacks, witnesses in Noma, Florida, swore they heard a mournful bellow echoing through the swamps, always timed to the whistle at the Alabama-Florida lumber mill. Some believed that it was the call of two-toed Tom, mistaking the sound for a mate. Others said it was a cry of defiance, a signal he was still here. With time, the legend began to fade. By the 1980s, sightings had slowed, but then, in the early 2000s, something strange happened. A grainy, eerie photograph began circulating. It showed a massive alligator swimming across a lake, the limp body of a fully grown deer clamped firmly in its jaws. Original reports said it was taken at Lake Martin, Alabama, by a forest ranger on patrol. Others were quick to point out that it appeared that the image was in fact taken in Georgia. The origins were murky, the details inconsistent, but the image itself was very real. Verified by the US Fish and Wildlife Service, it showed a gator up to 14 feet long, exactly the size Two-Toed Tom was said to be. That's a real big alligator, generally considered to be the very upper size limit of these creatures, though it's perhaps worth noting the report on LouisianaAlligators.com that
the record alligator taken in Louisiana was 19 feet 2 inches long.
Whether this was really him or not, people saw the picture and remembered old Red Eyes. Could it really have been him? We'll never know. What is known is that the town of Esto, Florida, embraced the story, launching the Two-Toed Tom Festival in 1987. In 2012, the festival was revived again and still goes on to this day, as if the memory of Tom refuses to die, just like the creature himself. There are claims he was seen as recently as 2015, leaving his telltale tracks through remote backwater channels. Others claim the tracks were a hoax, a prank, a story meant to stir up old fears. But the swamps are vast, and there are places, quiet, sunless places where the mud is thick. Trees crowd out the sky, and something ancient could very easily still be hiding. So, could Two-Toed Tom still be alive? Maybe. Maybe not. If he really is just a large alligator, then the chances are that old Red Eyes is now dead and gone. But if the stories are true, and he really is something more than that, then how long do demons live? Two-Toed Tom is more than just a swamp monster. He's a creature born from a fierce landscape that's as punishing as it is beautiful. A place where the swamp both sustains life and threatens it in equal measure. In the swamps and backwaters of rural Alabama and Florida, the land itself feels ancient, vast, and indifferent. In such unforgiving terrain, it's no surprise that tales like Tom's took root. Tom, in all his monstrous fury, seems to embody the fear that although we may depend on it for survival, the wilderness is so vast and so ancient that it cannot truly be mastered. He's remembered not just for his size or his cunning, but for his cruelty. There's a darkness to this legend that sets it apart, a sense that what stalks the waters isn't just dangerous, but demonic, something that should not exist. Something fearsome not just in shape, but in spirit. His eyes don't simply watch, they glow. His violence isn't simply predatory, it's calculated, vindictive. In a time and place where life was often hard and justice wasn't always guaranteed, those fears may have found a home in the alligator's monstrous form. That the legend first emerged in the 1920s may also be quite telling. This was a time of profound upheaval in the American South, in which many communities were grappling with rapid change. Mechanization disrupted rural life. A post-Reconstruction legacy of violence and trauma still haunted the region, and revivalist religion was clashing with older folk beliefs. We can see evidence of this in the way that Tom is framed as a hell-born, red-eyed, demon-like creature. The very language used to describe him suggests a cultural crossroads. Tom was born of folklore, but shaped by the evangelical lens of the time. Indeed, this is how he's presented to this day. The very embodiment of evil made flesh, something demonic, something that could not be reasoned with or tamed. Tom's unkillable nature, alongside his hatred for man-made things, his extreme violence and his cunning, all of this seems to echo deep-seated anxieties about vulnerability, justice, and retribution in a world where the institutions meant to protect people often failed them, and violence often went unanswered. That Tom's violence carries a uniquely cruel undertone suggests a fear not just of being killed, but of being profaned, of being made less than human in a landscape that offers no comfort and no redemption. Perhaps that's why the story endures. The unkillable alligator became a mirror for the crueler truths of life on the margins. That sometimes suffering comes without cause. That evil may decide to knock on your door, having crawled, slow and silent, from the water's edge. In this way, Tom reflects a worldview in which evil isn't distant, abstract, or mythic. It's local, intimate, crawling just beneath the surface. And perhaps most frighteningly, it wears the shape of something familiar. Not a dragon or a spectre, but an alligator. Something real, something native to the land, and yet twisted into something infernal. This legend is more than just an old tale about a particularly aggressive alligator. It gives us a glimpse into how people in isolated and often neglected parts of America made sense of suffering, injustice, and the uncanny violence of the natural world. Two-Toed Tom is what happens when fear, folklore, and the land itself fuse into one story, and that story refuses to die. Even today, long after the land has changed and the world has moved on, the legend of old Red Eyes still lingers. Because it isn't just a folktale about a time and place long gone. It's a story that explores the boundary between the natural world, savage, wild and indifferent, and something darker, pure, calculated evil. Sometimes the line between the two is thinner than you'd think. but it's also a reminder that the fears which gave rise to this legend in the 1920s, fears of cruelty, injustice, and cultural upheaval, have not entirely disappeared. In the end, perhaps the real horror of Two-Toed Tom is not that the creature itself might still be real, but that the fears that created him are still here with us. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the legendary folklore of Florida and Alabama. If you enjoyed this story, then please give us a thumbs up and let me know what you liked about it in the comments. This not only helps the channel out, but also means you're more likely to see old world content in the future. I want to say a big thank you to Dixie After Dark for voicing the narrative section of this episode. If you want to learn more about American folklore, especially from the Deep South, then please head over to their wonderful channel. I'll put a link in the description and a card right at the end. They do some really excellent work keeping the folklore of that region alive and well. There are lots of irons in the fire at the moment as I'm preparing for the next season of Beasts of the Old World, and work continues on setting up the expanded podcast, which I'm hoping to launch fairly soon. Keep your eyes peeled and your ears to the ground for more news on these projects in the coming weeks. And finally, a big thank you to the people whose names you can see on the screen right now. The growing support on Patreon is really great, and I can't thank these wonderful people nearly enough. If you want to join the ranks over there for ad-free content and a couple of exclusives, then the link is in the description. It would be great to have your support. Until next time, I hope all is well in your neck of the woods. I'm Nick, and this is Beasts of the Old World. Thanks for watching.